Okay. For anyone who's just recently joined, my name is Paddy Shepherd, a Senior AI Specialist at Jisc. Hazel's also with us as well, Hazel White. And I know a few people across the colleges as well have joined us. So in today's session, we're going to look at an introduction to AI and how we use it effectively. Please do ask questions. You should have access to the Q&A pod, or you can pop it in the chat. It's easier if you pop it in the Q&A. It's just at the top of your screen, hopefully, or depends how you've set up your teams. But do ask questions throughout. I'll pause through the session as well for some questions, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. But do feel free to ask questions. So I'll get us started. 1 second. There we go. You can hopefully see my screen all right. So just to tell you a little bit about our team and the artificial intelligence team at Jisc, we run a number of tools and pilots. So we review tools, as part of our pilots. And we'll look at an artificial intelligence tool and we'll ask our members to contribute to a pilot study. And then we'll research and gather feedback from members, all the good and the bad. And then we'll write a report at the end of it, advising the sector. So the AI team really work with members in that, and may have been people who were part of our Teachermatic further education pilot that we ran, and as I know, one of the colleges in Northern Ireland was part of that. We also have two communities, one for further education and one for higher education, and these people meet once a month for about an hour online and talk all things AI. Interestingly, actually, in both the higher education and the further education space this year, the community have met, and members of the community are talking about what's happening with AI in their own institution, things around AI literacy or looking at it and understanding it. We also provide as much advice and guidance and training as we can. So this is obviously one of those areas for training. And then we write a number of advice and guidance blog posts and research papers as well. And then we also speak at a number of external events and activities. But getting into today's session, as I said, my name is Paddy Shepherd, Senior AI Specialist. But before I moved over to Jisc, I worked in teaching computing in further education. Apologies, in further education, and I've worked in teaching and learning development and head of engineering. So further education really is my space. That so hopefully I do understand some of it. But we're going to start today's session looking at the basics, as it were, getting everybody started on an AI literacy journey. Even if you're further ahead, absolutely fantastic. I think everybody's at different points. But I just wanted to recap for those people, or if you're joining and starting out now, just to give some capabilities and limitations. So thinking about generative AI, we're talking today around generative AI, and this is where it can write plausible sounding text. It can generate text, it can generate images and media. And this is from where you type in a prompt and you're using a tool like Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, or ChatGPT. So you type in a prompt and you ask it to generate something for you. Later on in the session, we've got some examples looking at, in particular for teaching and learning. But the capabilities of these tools are that they can write plausible sounding text on any topic. They've been trained from large quantities of data, and then they can answer a question provided that data is within them. They can generate answers to a range of questions, including coding, maths, and multiple choice. They are becoming more accurate and sophisticated with each new release. The ones that got access to the internet are more accurate and sophisticated with being up to date with the data. As some of the free versions don't have access to the internet, so they can only look at the existing data that they have. So say you asked a question about something more recent, it might not have that data. Each time you prompt, so you type in a question or you type in something you would like it to generate for you, it will generate a unique piece of text each time you use it. It is great at a wide range of tasks, including text summarization and proofreading. I often find that it's quite good with getting me started with getting a blank page started off or a blank presentation started off, and then it's quite good at the end with proofreading. But the bit in between really is not the AI intelligence, it's the human intelligence and my part of completing that task. So capabilities are, as we say, these are the capabilities. They will change obviously over time, but it can depend on which tool you're using. Today we're going to look at Microsoft Copilot. As I understand, most of the institutions are using Microsoft Copilot, so we've got those as our demonstrations. They have got limitations. Generative AI does have a limitation to it. speaker on. Okay, if we could just mute. I'm more than happy later on to ask questions, obviously. I'm just going to make sure that's happening. Everyone on mute. There we go. I think that's okay. Sorry. So talking about limitations, really, they often and can do generate plausible but incorrect information. So because it's trained on large chunks of data, you could ask it a question, but if it hasn't got that data, then it might give incorrect information. Or it has no, the other reason is because it has no real way of knowing with what it's generating is correct. So you could ask, is tomorrow Tuesday? And it could say, yes, tomorrow is Tuesday. But it could also say no, in theory, because it could be a plausible answer that tomorrow is Wednesday, for example. It only it's trying to be useful. These AI tools, they're trying to give the right information, but they can give incorrect information. It also includes that they can give false references and false claims about their own capabilities. So, for example, if you ask ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini, did you write this text? They could say yes. You could copy and paste some text in and put it in there because that's a plausible answer. However, it has no way of knowing whether it did write that text or not. It's just giving a plausible answer. They work by predicting the next word in a sequence of words rather than actually knowing it. And then depending on the AI tool that you're using, they may not have up-to-date information. So we're going to look at Copilot today with Microsoft Copilot, which does have access to the internet. But often you can always make sure, I would say that this part is, again, the human intelligence. And we need to think back to our information literacy. Like with anything in the media, anything we see online, we should always critically assess it and check, oh, is that right? Is that wrong? And not just necessarily trust it. So always make sure that if you're going to use that piece of information, that it's correct. I think as well, interestingly, this year, there's been a bit of a change towards the end of last year and this year with the way that we're using AI tools. So before and currently, we would log into, say, ChatGPT, or Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini, and we would have to go to a website. We would create the account with ChatGPT, and we would start asking questions. We'd be prompting and asking questions to try and generate answers. But you'll now probably notice at the top of Google, if you search for something, so here we have, what does Jisc do? And it's provided an AI overview. It's used Google Gemini, so their platform, and it's summarized from that prompt, as it were. Just like Googling, if they've asked for it, it's summarized that information from there. It has provided links. You can click on it and then go and have a link. But then if you scroll down on Google, then it will provide you with the web pages as well. So we're seeing AI integrated into more than just going to log into Microsoft Copilot or to Google Gemini. It's appearing in other places. You may have noticed as well on social media. Here it suggests write an article and you start a post, try writing with AI. So certainly being incorporated in social media as well. There's also tools that people maybe already use as well. Canva, I know that's quite a useful tool to generate content from. They have included now generative AI into their tools. So if you wanted to create a poster or an infographic, for example, you can give it a title and you can type in the title about a topic, and then you can use the AI tool within there and it will generate text based on that title. So they've generated it, they've incorporated a lot more AI within existing tools that we use. And I think moving forward, we're going to see AI embedded so much that we're not necessarily always going to notice it. It's one of those things. But as you can see, that it's being integrated quite a bit. And as I said a second ago, it's quite good at getting us started. We need the middle part ourselves, and then potentially at the end to tidy things up, maybe change an infographic. They've given us a suggested design. I want to tidy it up. I wanted to make it look how I'd like it. And at the end, then for proofreading. So AI, we're seeing quite a bit more. There's a bit of a shift for it. Now, many people, when we think about using AI tools, many people are aware and talking about AI and bias. So quite often you could prompt and you could ask a question about something and it will generate a content. So it will give you some text to answer your question, and it potentially will have bias in that information. In reality, there is no single cause of bias in AI. It's actually introduced at multiple points. which makes it quite difficult to completely mitigate in the creation of actual tools. Bias can actually be caused by groups of people being underrepresented in the training sets of data, so the data that's gone in to train these large language models, these chatbots. But for example, many of these models have actually been trained from data from mostly English and Western web pages, which then obviously can introduce bias because it's not fully aware globally. Bias can also be introduced in the data labeling. So once data has been input into ChatGPT, for example, or OpenAI, then humans get involved and they try and then label the data sets to say what type of topics it is. So without realizing it, but humans are labeling it potentially incorrectly, so bias could be introduced at that point. And then there's another way that bias can be introduced, which is when developers actually evaluate the tools. So the way they evaluate them, they'll log in to ChatGPT, for example, to a large language model, and they will ask questions. And if the AI tool returns with good results, so they've asked a question and it's returned the right result, then they'll obviously say that's correct. If it's incorrect, then they'll say it's incorrect. But at that point, there could be human bias being entered in without realizing it or without meaning to. So I think, unfortunately, we're certainly seeing the consequences of this, but the AI tools themselves are certainly trying to improve this. We can see this example here from September 2022 from nurses. Obviously, all females have been shown in that image there. This is an image from Midjourney, which is a text. You type in the text and then it will create an image for you, prompt. And over on the right-hand side, we can see in May 2023, it's certainly an improvement there with the workforce. Now, this is quite an old one now, really, but it's certainly something to consider. And us as the user is the important thing. We are aware that bias can be represented because of the data. We are aware that it can be misinformation, but what we have to do as a user is think about, okay, I'm not going to use that now because I think there's bias in that piece of information. Just be critically aware. This isn't anything new either. I mean, at least we're talking about it, but obviously we've seen bias in many different forms over the years. So it's just thinking back to our digital literacy skills, but also our information literacy skills, and be aware of its capabilities, of why that's there. So certainly if you're going to make anything, always critically evaluate it before maybe an email, or you've crafted an email using it. Maybe think about that obviously before we send it out, because then it becomes our word. So yeah, think about it. Quite often as well, people have been asking about data minimization. I've been asking, right, concerned about data. So concerned about what data, if they input data, what happens to that data. Artificial intelligence and generative AI follows the same principles in the UK as the Data Protection Act. So we would always suggest avoid inputting sensitive or unnecessary data into these tools. So think back to the principles of the Data Protection Act. I wouldn't, for example, get some of my students' grades and results and put them onto Google, onto a web page, because that would be breaking data protection. It's the same if you're using some of these free tools. So there's more risk with the free tools that you don't have an account for. For example, Microsoft Copilot, if you're an institution that already has that. In my case, I'm using Microsoft Copilot, and we have a contract in place with Microsoft already for our OneDrive and our Office 365. So there's already those contracts in place. So that's already gone through our GDPR and checking out the data protection. So if you're using a system through your work account and the agreement has been put in place, then all data will be safe. It won't go into the large language model. It won't go into Copilot if you're typing data in, and it won't save it. However, if I went to use the free version of ChatGPT, it would at this current time. But if I'm using the paid version, it'd be fine. So it's always important to consider which tools you're using. And then if you are using those free tools, always aggregate and anonymize any data where possible. I'm just going to go back and just talk a little bit more around that. But if I was thinking about using Canva to create a poster, well, I might not have the terms and conditions, or I'm just using the free account, but I wouldn't enter any personal data into that. But if I'm using Microsoft Copilot within my own organization and we have that contract that says we've got data protection promises on, then we know that it won't go anywhere else. It just stays within the ecosystem, as it were. So it's thinking about which one to use, really. But one more point on this, Canva, I probably wouldn't need to enter any personal data in, because I'm only going to use it to create infographics, posters, that sort of thing, or some videos potentially. So Remember back to data minimization, we do that already with lots of our data, all of our data anyway, so just be aware of that. Think back to the data protection principles and follow these two. So in a second, we're going to have a look at, in a minute, we're going to have a look at a few examples though for teaching and learning using Microsoft Copilot. But before we do, it's just always useful to talk about these AI tools can provide outdated information. If the data setting is if it's a free one and they don't have access to the internet, they can provide you with outdated information. An example of this was, for example, about last year, quite often you ask ChatGPT who the Prime Minister was in England, and it would give the wrong result because it didn't have up-to-date information. So certainly quite a good way to test them and which one you're using. Ask about a current affair. They can often get confused with similar entities. So, for example, there is the capital of Wales, Cardiff, in the UK, but there's also a Cardiff in New South Wales in Australia. And the reason why they're getting confused is potentially because of our prompts that we're asking. So when we're asking, we need to think about and to be clear. It's the same as human communication. If I walked into a coffee shop this morning and asked for a coffee, they would probably look at me and say, what coffee would you like? Mocha, latte, would you like soy milk? What would you like? So you have to be a bit clearer with it. So it's just thinking about giving it a bit of, if I am asking a prompt around Cardiff in South Wales, in Wales, the UK, or something like that. It can also misunderstand your queries. So, for example, my friend recently wanted a hand. She used ChatGPT to help her with her wedding invitations and what to write on there. And it actually assumed that her wedding had already taken place. And the reason for this was the way she asked her prompt. So try and be as clear as possible, but do understand it can sometimes, like humans, misunderstand what you're asking and saying. So be aware of that and just prompt start again. And then it can make incorrect assumptions as well about places and people, so be aware of that. And then as we've just seen, it can have bias or unbalanced views because it's trained on that data. So treat it as an assistant. That's what we're saying quite often with these. I use it at the beginning to get me started, to give me some ideas. I use it at the end when I want some proofreading, but I don't take it as gospel. I will continually review, critically assess what it's saying to me, and then use what I like. So certainly there are some concerns around it, but just be aware of that. So thinking now, we're going to move on and have a look at AI in learning and teaching. I've got a few examples using Microsoft Copilot. So hopefully some of these are useful, but it really is down to the user and what works well for you at the end of the day. So I've just tried to give a broad example here. So I've got a few videos and I'm going to play them and demonstrate them. And then after we've done this part, then we'll come to some Q&A if that's okay. Let me just get this started. Oh, there we go. So this first one is looking at creating a lesson. And I'm not actually going to create a lesson plan directly with it. I want some ideas. I'm using it as an assistant. So for my first prompt, I ask, I'm planning a geography lesson for 16 and 17-year-olds on climate change. Can you help me draft some clear learning objectives for the lesson? Now it's going to give me a load here, but as we can see, it's given me absolutely, I'd be happy to help. Here's some clear objectives. So understanding climate change. Students will be able to define climate change and differentiate it from weather. Students will be able to understand natural and human induced causes to climate change. So I think we all have those lessons. My background, as I say, was teaching as well. And you all have those lessons that, goodness me, how am I going to put all this together? Right, okay, let's have a think. And this is where it's quite useful to give us ideas as an assistant. We've got for number 2, impacts of climate change. Students will identify and explain various impacts on climate change on the environment, such as risks of sea levels and so on. It's just to give us those ideas. Critical thinking and problem solving, personal responsibility and action. So it's again giving us those ideas. Now, as we can see at the bottom of this video, of the screen, hopefully, you can see you've got a thumbs up, thumbs down, so that's whether you like the response or not. And we've got this is actually the copy button, so it's a rectangle where you can copy it and paste it into another document, into Word or something. And all of them pretty much now have this. AI generated content may be incorrect. So even the developers of these tools are highlighting that to us as the users. And then the 1 to 30 responses in Microsoft Copilot. you can have up to 30 responses with the same topic within that conversation. So I can ask 30 questions basically based on this one topic. Then all I have to do, if I would like some more, I click on new chat and I can start again and I can have a continued conversation. I haven't reached 30 myself yet, but the reason for that is if you ask them 30 questions, it will stay on topic and it's going to remember everything, all 30 questions. It's going to build on it further and further. But after that, the capabilities aren't so good, so it can go off topic. So you potentially lose the topic about climate change and go on to something else. So those are the reasons. Microsoft Copilot also has suggested prompts. So yeah, these are great. Thank you. Can you provide me some activity ideas for this lessons, or what resources can you be used to enhance this lesson? So I'm making suggestions there. So on to the next part now. Can you suggest a lesson plan outline for 60 minutes, for a 60-minute lesson for the same age group? So I'm giving it a little bit more context. I've got a few ideas now from what it's given me. And now I'd like to actually look at an outline of a lesson. So quite quickly, we have an introduction. We have defining climate change. We've got some timing, so 10 minutes. We've moved on from defining to impacts, mitigation and adaptation, local and global perspectives, and it's breaking it all down. Recap at the end, and then some Q&A and even a suggested homework assignment. Now, again, whether that's going to work for my group of learners, or it might work with one class but not another class, it's just picking up ideas here and using it in that way. I'm next asking, how can I differentiate my lesson for learners with different learning needs? This is, again, where it's quite useful. It will come up with a range of suggestions, but you know, we know our learners and which ones it might work on or not. But it's come up with variety, flexible grouping, small groups, mixed ability groups, choice boards. My learners used to certainly like those. Scaffold support, mixing things up. And I think, especially after like maybe the summer, we go back to our standard what we think will work. But actually, it's picking it up and thinking about our pedagogy and thinking, oh, actually, let's give that a go. So certainly quite useful for suggestions. So far we've had a look at getting some objectives or getting a start of objectives. We've then thought about how we're going to plan it out. So I've planned it. I'm then using that. I'm going away and planning out my scheme of work, for example, or I'm using it. And then I'd like to think about some resources. So I'm going to ask in this case, can you recommend some interactive tools or resources to use during the lesson? This is where it's quite good because it's now searching the internet, as Copilot has got access to the internet, and it's giving me suggestions here. So if I just play this a little bit longer, here we are. You can see that it has suggested some websites, and this one, NOAA, offers a variety of interactive tools that allow students to explore climate data, model scenarios, and understand the impacts of climate change. So in traditional terms, I would maybe use Google and try and find some websites and evaluate them. And once we find some websites, we still have to do the evaluation part. So I would still need to click on this and go and check that website. You might see the 1, 2, and 3. Those are basically the number of the sources. So Copilot will show us the source of information, but we can go and then check those websites and see if they're then going to be useful for teaching and learning. And as we can see, the links are there. It also provides the links at the bottom, so the sources of its information. As you can see, learn more at the bottom, so climate.gov. So I'd probably be okay with those. I think, okay, that looks like a good link. I'll go and have a look at that. Make sure it's referenced for the UK potentially if that's part of it. But you can see that you can click on those, go and review those websites, and then perhaps use it as a homework activity or something. I'm really thinking not just about creating that lesson plan, but getting ideas and inspiration. So that's one suggestion. Our next suggestion we have is, now we've got our ideas, we're going to get going. I need some learning activities. So for this, I'm going to ask, can you help me generate some learning activities on critical thinking? I've deliberately switched the subject here to show the difference, and it's pretty good at different subjects and topics. So it's suggesting some debate scenarios, case studies. It's giving me an activity and an objective as well for those. Again, we would need to make sure that's suitable for our learners. I could change my prompt. So I was very vague there and asked, just to create me some activities. But we could ask, you know, for 16-year-olds, for 17-year-olds, or higher. It won't necessarily understand the UK level 1, level 2, level 3 system, but if we maybe give an age, the context might help. Fishbowl discussions, an activity, arrange chairs in the inner and outer circle. Participants in the inner circle discuss topics while others in the outer circle take notes and switch roles. Group discussions, mind mapping. Again, always and with activities and objectives, so reflection and feedback. After each activity, have a reflection session where participants discuss what they've learned, provide feedback on the activity, and then the objective really there is to reinforce learning and encourage continuous improvement. So some of these you might use, some of these you might not. Thinking about then simplifying it, I'm going to ask, can you simplify these activities for beginners? And it has looked at the content that's already generated, and now it's given me some simplified versions. So simple debate, split into pairs and choose a simple topic, and they've given you a topic, and then practice, and then objective, practice, express, and defending oppositions. Basic case studies, easy puzzles. So again, it's trying to make some suggestions. Whether that works for my learners, it's down to me to choose then which one I might use. Now I'm going to ask, can you suggest some more? You can always ask for it to suggest more. You can always ask it to change the tone as well. Please change the tone of this, or give me some more, or make it slightly harder, make it easier. Got some more facts versus opinion, brainstorming session, yes, no questions. So some of these are pretty obvious, but it might think, oh, okay. I think it's thinking about the activity and then the context. And then it's quite good at organising. So please organise these by type. So are they individual activities, group activities, interactive, or by learning objective? So it's going to look at what it's generated for me, and now it's going to organise them. So we've got our type, by type there, individual activities, group activities, and interactive. So it's organised it. I can then go and pick that up and use that as a toolbox if I wish to. And then it's thinking about the skills as well, potentially, that they might develop. So it's a starting point. It hasn't completed my learning activity at all. It completed it from beginning to end, but it's been quite useful to get me started. Now, this is another one. If we've got some learning activities, we've got a lesson plan, we've gone away and done that. I now need to create a presentation for the lesson. This tool is a free tool called Gamma, and you can access it just in your web browser, and go to Gamma, and you can create a presentation from it. So in this case, I've actually already created, got my lesson outline, as it were. So just pause this slightly. So I've got some text, and what I did when it went through very quickly there, I went to the website. I clicked on create new AI. So I want to create a new presentation. Now I pasted the text in, but you can actually give it a prompt. Please create me a lesson about geography, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, for example, and it will create a presentation from that. Or you can import your own files. So if you've got an older presentation, you can upload that into it and it will regenerate that and perhaps update it. So in this case, I've got some text that I want. And we've got slide 1, I've got an outline. So I did this outline in Copilot, for example. And then it will ask me, so I've got my text in the middle. And then over on the left-hand side, I can ask it to generate from that text. So that's my prompt in theory. Or I can preserve it where it will just use this text and it'll put that onto the presentation that it's going to create in a second. I can then change the level of text I want on each presentation slide, so on each card. I then give it some context. So in this case, who I'm writing it for is for UK agricultural professionals and policymakers. And I would like the tone to be informative, objective, and concise. So we can then, we're trying to give it really who we want it to be aimed at. So we've got that there, and we're going to let it run. We can also ask if we want images, and they have added in now English UK as well. So the slides generated with English UK. And we want to have it as a presentation because that's the aim here. I can go and then choose from a range of presentation templates. And I can click generate. And as we can see, it starts to generate it. Now, again, we can edit it because we might not be happy with the content. It may hallucinate at this point where it gives the wrong, incorrect information. So always be aware of it. Check it before obviously we show our learners or anyone. It's also generating images as well, but some of the images do come from its stock library as well. So it's not necessarily generating a new image each time. Some will come from there. And we can go through, as I say, and edit it. We can see that the image might now not necessarily be relevant, or I don't want the image there. It's up to me to really edit and change that. But a good starting point. And then over on the right-hand side here, it's just doing it quite quickly, but I can export it as a PDF or as a PowerPoint file. As did the free version I used, I was able to get 10 slides. So that might not be big enough for the topic, but we can download it in PowerPoint and then we can start editing and adding more information on there. So I'm going to export it, for example, as a PowerPoint, and that will literally download and open as a PowerPoint. So again, starting point, I found this quite useful if I'm going to present about a topic, quite a short topic, and then I suddenly, oh goodness, okay, that's changed. My background was teaching computer science and things change so often and update. So you often find yourself, oh, okay, no, the spec says this and I need to, oh no, right, the media's changed, let's go and have a look and add this in. So I found it quite useful for smaller topics, actually. So one other suggestion there, so that website's called Gamma to create presentations. Another one now is creating multiple choice questions, and this is kind of taking it a little bit further than just basic multiple choice questions. In this example, I'm asking, can you create MCQs for questions to assess 18-year-olds learners for understanding of Newton's first law of motion? Can you help me craft some clear questions? And quite quickly, we can see it has generated a question. So Newton's first law of motion states that an object will rest and remain at rest, and an objection in motion will continue unless it's acted upon. And then it's given me a list of answers and then the correct answer. Remember, it can hallucinate and get that wrong. So ideally, I would know enough about the subject to scan read that and be happy with the answer. But it's pretty accurate with those. A load of questions given to us. We can review those. Now, the only thing I really with multiple choice questions is, and I remember back to days of Kahoot, and Kahoot's pretty useful, but learners would just really quickly click it to get the points and the score, and rather than actually slow down and think about what is the answer here. So we want to make sure that we're stretching them a little bit more than just giving that quick answer. So here I'm going to ask, oh goodness me, apologies. I'm going to ask, can you suggest realistic distractors for MCQs on Newton's first law that must reflect common misconceptions? I'm going to take it a little bit further here. So we've now got some longer questions. So if we have a look at those. So certainly here's some realistic distractors. And we've got Newton's first law. So we have here the question, Newton's first law of motion states that an objective at rest will remain at rest, and an object in the motion will continue in motion unless acted upon by, and then A. So they have to give a little bit more. And then we've got here the second set, common misconceptions, adds distractors, and they have to then give their answer to that as well. So we're getting a little bit more when we're thinking about the type of question. And then for this one, I would like to think about, how can I ensure my MCQ questions on Newton's law go beyond simple recall and encourage deeper understanding? So I want to think about the question types here. So here we are. So it's giving me some suggestions. We've got application-based questions. So an example, a car suddenly stops as a passenger moves forward. Which Newton's law explains this in motion and why? And then it's listed them there. So they have to think a little bit more, hopefully. Conceptual questions. Scrolls down, there we go. Conceptual questions. Oh, apologies. I videoed this because it's usually better, but it's me today. Common conceptual questions. Why does a book on a table remain at rest according to Newton's first law? And then it's given those questions and they have to give their answers. Cause and effect questions. Misconception-based questions. Higher order thinking questions as well. So it doesn't just have to be, 10 multiple choice questions, we can take it a little bit further and ask it, how can I develop that? How can I develop their understanding rather than just simple recall? It's good at making those suggestions. Again, it would be down to us whether we use those, but it's a suggestion. In a second, we'll have some questions. We've got 2 more of these, and then we can have some time for Q&A. But quite often I found teaching this I have here as an example from a BTEC Pearson specification, an old one now. But quite often we, teach, they go to do the summative assessment, and I'm thinking, goodness me, perhaps needed to step back a bit and do a bit more in the formative stage. So this is where I could see it being used if we can create rubrics from the specification. So in this case, I need to create a rubric for an assessment, and I'd like a little bit really around formative. Please create a rubric based on learning outcomes 1 on the left. Now I have a caveat here. So I'm asking it to look up to this document on the left-hand side. I've got it open as a PDF document. I just need to get some ideas and a rubric, a marking rubric that I could have a formative assessment for. 9 times out of 10, it will look up to the left, the PDF document that's open. I have this open in Microsoft Edge. Sometimes it doesn't get it right, so then you have to prompt again. So in that case, I might upload, so using a paperclip, I might upload the PDF into Copilot and ask, please create me exactly the same. Please create a rubric for an assessment. Please create it on learning outcome 1. But there's no rhyme or reason. 9 times out of 10, this does seem to work for me, but there is that caveat, so be aware. Sometimes it's just playing with it. So I've uploaded it, and I'll be happy to create this for you. Answer from the page instead. So this, let me just go back slightly, my caveat there, just to show it. As we can see, I'd be happy to help you create the rubric. Please could you provide me with a specific learning outcome and you have in mind, and then answer from this page instead. So be aware, it can just pop up like that. So here we can see that it's now thinking about it, it's looking at the content, and it's going to generate some learning outcomes, a rubric for me. So pass, merit, distinction, and then, oh goodness me, it has impacts on society, which this is on HCI. So yeah, just a few ideas there. Now I had the paid version at the time, so I was then able to download it into an Excel file, and I had some pass criteria, merit criteria, distinction criteria based on my topics. If you haven't got that version, you can just simply copy it. As I said earlier on, you can copy it out and put it into an Excel file as well. So it depends on which version at the time that you've got of Microsoft Copilot. But again, useful, might give us some ideas. And then one more, and then we'll have some questions, and then we've got a little bit more to look at afterwards. But AI is quite useful, as I say, as an assistant, and thinking of possible problem solving. It can help with things like that. It can help us with reflection as well. So for this example, I'm delivering a lesson about Shakespeare to 16-year-olds to help the students understand lasting impacts of Shakespeare's works on literature, culture, and modern media. I'd like them to understand the impact. However, nothing seems to be working on what can I do. We've all had lessons like that where we're thinking, this is not what I wanted. What's going on? Ask it for suggestions, might be useful. This is where we traditionally do that in the staff room as well. So obviously continue doing that. But it's come up with a number of suggestions. We've got 7 suggestions there, and we could review those and think, no, absolutely not. Oh, but actually one of those is a good idea. In this case, I quite like number 5. And this one here is create projects. Encourage students to create their own projects based on Shakespeare's work. This could be anything from writing a modern version of a scene, creating artwork inspired by a play, or even asking them to compose a song. So we could look at the number of these and then think, actually, how am I going to get them to assess it then? So my next point, we're reviewing them. Okay, how could I assess their learning? If I follow your example, 5. So then get some ideas for that. So that I can assess their learning by them giving a presentation, a reflection essay, peer reviews. Oh, 1 second. There we are. Peer reviews or rubrics. So I could then think about that. But actually, this is formative assessment. They haven't been working very well with me so far. I need to get them involved a bit more. So I've decided I'm going to go with number 3. a peer review. Implement a peer review process where students evaluate each other's projects. This encourages critical thinking and allows them to learn from their classmates. So I could then ask for it to actually create that peer review for me. So I'm going to ask in a second. Please create a template for step 3. And as we can see, we've got a peer review template. Reviewer name, project title, the date, overall impressions, connection to modern themes. It's linked it to what we've been talking about. Understanding of Shakespeare's work, creativity and originality, and it's given me a scale there, excellent, good, poor. And this is where students would obviously peer assess each other. What did you like most about the project? What suggestions do you have? Now, again, that's just an idea, but those are the things that take time to make, to go away and make a peer assessment review like that, a quick form. That's where this can be quite useful. And then I could ask, okay, now can I think about addressing differentiation and thinking about some activities? What suggestions do you have? So here we have some tried assignments. We can have choice boards, flexible grouping, varied resources, scaffold tasks, step-by-step guides for different learning styles, character diaries, and so on. So it's quite useful for getting those ideas. If it's okay, we're going to see if we've got any, I'll take a pause point now and see if we've got any key questions in the chat. I'm going to just move over 1 second. Oh, you've got your hand up. You can unmute yourself. I can just see a hand up. I'm not sure who it is.
Shukla, are you happy to talk, Shukla? I'm not sure if realize their hand is up. Do you want to unmute yourself there? No.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes.
I can't. Yeah. So I want to ask that can an AI tool help to practice interviews? Like, for example, like if I can see that it can make um, uh, PowerPoints and slides and suggest other suggestions. But can it help a person to prepare some students for interviews?
Yes, and I've got a nice example for you actually.
Yeah, thank you.
As this is like Blue Peter, which is quite good because you've asked that question. I'm going to pop this in the chat for everybody. Last year I worked with 20 of our further education, 20 colleges, further education members, and we put together a list of what needs to be included in AI literacy for learners. And interestingly, we came up with what needs to be included. And we've got one of those as our examples. So I've put in the chat for everybody a link to our Explore AI at Jisc webpage, and students can get to this as well. And if you go to, so you go to the homepage, but if you go to Gen AI in Practice, we've got learner AI literacy resources. We also have staff ones as well. And in there, learners we've written it for FE actually. Learners can click onto this and they can download Word documents. And in this Word documents, it tells them, if I open one up, it tells them all about what is AI. So I've dragged this over. It tells them ideally so they can understand it. Artificial intelligence doesn't just have one definition and so on. So they can read through that. I am creating videos as well to go alongside these, which will go up on our page as well. But we also have on here, if I go back slightly, so we've got what is AI, how to use it, what are the limitations, AI glossaries and things like that. That was in the first page. So that was getting to understand AI. We also have using AI responsibly, and that talks around bias and data and things like that. But in our third section, we've got using AI to support your education. And your one was preparing for interviews, wasn't it? I've created a number of prompt sheets. So we've got practical scenarios and explanations of how learners can work with an AI tool. All examples are focused on using AI as a support tool to enhance learning and not replace learners' work. So I've linked a skill. Rather than just learners learning how to prompt, I wanted to try and link some skills. So we've got communication skills, reading and writing, but then they're going to learn how to prompt along the way. So if I open this one up, preparing for interviews. Preparing for an interview can involve researching a role, thinking about what questions you may be asked, and they're really good at role play and asking questions. So for this example, you've been invited to an interview to become a student union representative and you need to prepare. So you must start by reading the job description and understanding the main responsibilities. So they can read through this and then they can look at the prompts. So this, for example, is you use an AI tool. Hello, I'm preparing for an interview for the student union representative. Would you like to help as an interviewer? Please conduct a mock interview based on the following job description. So hopefully that might be something that they can go and do, and as a scenario, and they can use it as an assistant, really. Interview it, it's giving them suggestions. Can you tell us about yourself? So it's asked them some questions and they can answer it, and it will come back and keep asking questions. I've given some suggested prompts as well. What are some good ways to structure a response to an interview question? Can you suggest some common questions that might be asked in a job title, and they put that in there? What kinds of work-life experiences might involve for this type of job? So there's a load of, there's as many as I've had a chance to do. So there's a few on there for students. But yeah, it will. I mean, they need to understand. The only thing I would say with learners, they do need to understand it can make mistakes. It can have bias in it. So that's why learners' AI literacy, before they jumped onto something like this with prompting, I would tell them to read through the first two, the getting to understand artificial intelligence and using AI responsibly. With those documents, feel free to change them. We've published them as part of our working group with members. So use them, adapt them, change them. If they can give ideas, then fantastic. While I'm on this page, we also have staff resources as well. So again, today we've just had a quick go through, but we've got AI fundamentals, so an introduction to AI, limitations, capabilities. And then I've got a number of example demos as well in a very similar way, with a download sheet in a very similar way. It has, if I'm going to open it up, creating a lesson plan. So example, you need to create a lesson on geography and climate change, similar to today's. And I've got some prompts on there and I'm showing people what it might respond with, the AI might provide, what information, differentiation, and we have a load on there. But for the staff ones, I've also been able to make some videos. So we've got some video demos on here, where we have same videos we saw earlier on. My avatar, because I've used Synthesia to do this, where I've used text and we've got my avatar there speaking over it and explaining through it. So do feel free to go and look at those as well, and all the other case studies and examples on there. Do we have any more questions? No worries. Well, I'll come back to questions at the end as well, because we've got some time for that as well. So a few more points now. Microsoft Copilot, I've stuck to that because I understand that most institutions have access to that. It can also generate images, and this is an example where we have created an image of a university in the UK. Now we can see that's very AI generated, and it's lovely blue skies and so on. You can also request, for example, you can add on icons to images, you can create images in the cartoon style, and you can change dimensions. Now, we do know environmentally that generating an image uses quite a bit more energy than just text. So I would always say, if you're going to generate an image, if it already exists, perhaps don't worry about doing it. If you want to generate an image of a racing car, there's quite a few images of racing cars already out there. So look in stock libraries first, rather than using this. But it might help generate, with inspiration as well. So for my example here, I use this presentation slide on a number because obviously I don't want to generate each time I'm on a session. Getting to know Microsoft Copilot as well. They've improved with the suggested prompts now. So in the middle part, Suggested prompts. If you're not sure of what to do, you can just type in, or you can click on that and it will use the prompt. You type your prompt in at the bottom, and you can also attach and upload documents into there and ask around questions around that. On the right hand side, it will show you your chat history when you've had previous chats. And then to start a new chat, you click on new chat. Next to that button, you can see that little shield. That means I've got enterprise protection mode on because I've logged into my work account. So everything is saved within that. It doesn't go into train the large language model or anything like that, but it's all safe within that environment. Also check sources. We've had that in the demonstrations. So sources are shown at the bottom. We've got examples here, but you can click on them and you can go and check them. So always check the sources as well. And it does remind us of that. We have it here again. AI generated content may be incorrect. Thinking about productivity and using AI versus standard or now standard ways of working. Let's have a look here at the internet versus Gen AI. So I've got the tool, I've got the task, and then if we look at this middle box, internet searching, before generative AI came along, if I need to find out some information about a topic, I would research on the internet. I would try and find some information, researching on websites and databases, and then I have my information. I need to create a presentation. Well, then I would then manually create that presentation, but I would following on from my manual research, as it were. Now I've got my presentation. Imagine I've got my research. I've created my presentation. I now need to create a guide because following on from the presentation, I need to give it in a Word document, different format. Well, that's then we'd have to go into Word and we'd have to do it and start again with the information that we have, though. But the benefit of AI in productivity, we can ask it for information. It will summarize the information with a basic prompt. We can ask it to generate presentation outlines. We can ask Gamma, for example, to give us a presentation. And then once I've got my presentation, I could then ask, please convert this, or please create this into a guide. And that's where the time saving can happen once I've got my content that I'm happy with. So certainly thinking from a productivity time and saving time, that's where it can be useful. But it's down to us as individuals, I suppose. I know that a number of members have been part of our Teachermatic pilot, and if you haven't seen it, Teachermatic uses generative AI, and they have a number of generators. And in this case, we're having a look at creating a lesson plan, and the lesson plan is an introduction to Python. It's quite good as it has knowledge, comprehend. You can choose your different levels that you would like to be included in the lesson plan, and it will generate a lesson plan for you. But they've got a number of different generators on there, and they will actually create all the detail in there. And then compared to using Copilot, for example, the prompt there is literally introduction to Python. So the prompting wasn't as detailed, but it's a good platform for people to generate content. There's quite a bit happening there. But we did find in our further education pilot that it saved around 3 hours. So it does save quite a bit of time when we're planning and thinking in that way. You may have come across as well, this is another tool some have got access to, but this is Notebook LM, and this you can upload documents into it and it will just focus on those documents. So for example, I have the 6 documents that I created for the learner resources, and then I can start asking questions about what's in those documents. It's a different way to interact with it. It will summarize those documents and even make a podcast as well. So you can then listen to the information rather than having to read it. So a different way to interact. And another tool that we've come across, which has been quite useful, is I'm going to play this for you.
Welcome to our introduction to generative AI in education. Today we explore how these technologies are impacting learning and teaching. Note, this is just a demo to show AI-generated content. Welcome to...
Oh, goodness me. As you can see, that was actually an avatar, and that was text to speech. So in a similar way to how I created the video demonstrations for staff, you can type in text and you can use an avatar and it will speak the text. They're quite useful in the way of, it's a different format of information, but also when information changes, which it always does in AI, I can quickly go back and change the text and then regenerate it, rather than having to record an hour-long video in front of a camera to explain some information. So it's interesting in that space where that's going. I would see AI as a toolbox and as an assistant. It's quite useful with getting started, planning, outlining ideas. It's good at researching. Remember, it can make mistakes, so go and check the source. Creating content, changing, updating. editing tools, so tone adjuster. Is my tone clear enough? Is it right for the right people? Grammar checker. And then you can use that as feedback as well. So progress, how have I hit this criteria? Am I okay with this? And then it can also analyze as well data quite well and provide information around that. There are a few questions I would say to think about, because we have covered really the capabilities and limitations here, but there are a few to think about. How can we help learners develop critical thinking skills to build confidence? It's also about learners' AI literacy. They're going into the workplace and employers are asking for AI literacy skills. They're asking for information literacy skills, digital literacy skills, and artificial intelligence AI literacy skills. Think about how you could support AI literacy, promote equality, and prevent over-reliance on AI. We still need to excel at the things that we do well at as humans. We need that human intelligence in between. And then what else can we do to ensure students are prepared for an AI-enabled world that they will enter, as we do know that that's obviously going to be the case. Just a quick thing on AI for accessibility, just to highlight that AI actually has helped with for the accessibility community. They said that it's quite good at summarizing documents and large chunks of information. Microsoft Copilot, if you open up a PDF, this one here is 44 pages, you could ask it to summarize those 44 pages. Again, a caveat, it will choose what it takes out. So you probably still need to have a skim read over it, but you can start asking questions around the content it's generated. So please summarize this PDF and it will give key facts. And then you can click on the numbers and it will take you to the page. This is another tool that many people quite like, Magic Tools, and you can ask it to break down a task for you. So here we have my task was to create and deliver a presentation on AI use in education. And Magic Tools, Goblin Tools, sorry, it's a website called Goblin Tools. You just type it into Google. It broke that task down for me into all the things I needed to do. So this was developed for students with ADHD, and they found it quite useful because they're able to break things down, but quite a nice tool there. Another tool, just before we finish, in Microsoft Seeing AI, many students are using this in the accessibility community, and they can take photos of the back of a book, for example. It will then play them. A voice recording or a sound recording of what that text says. Again, it's different ways to interact with information. And then they can start asking questions about that book that it's looked up on the internet as well. So it's a different way to interact. And then reminder, the immersive reader is pretty good, which is all over Microsoft Office 365. It will read text to speech. Text to speech, it will read that out for you. And then there's another one, Speechify as well, but that one you can choose the different voice that speaks to you as well. So practical strategies for using AI: start using an AI tool, find time to play with it, think about things you would like to try, but also explore what they're good at and not so good at. The one caveat I would say with what they're bad at right now, they may improve that in 6 months or a year's time as they develop. We do have some online courses available to you as well. These are free and they take about half an hour to an hour. They're available at jisc.ac.uk/training, and we've got some 2 online ones that you can do. They're online learning modules. You can get involved, you can talk to people about them, and it's AI and ethics, and then an introduction to generative AI in education. You can sign up for those, and then you have a month's access to it and go on and do it. They're about half an hour, as I say. We also have a number of training sessions. You may have been to one before, but that's available on our training page as well. These are online webinars. We're about to publish a load more dates as well. But in particular for FE, there's one looking at assessment and FE in the FE space, and developing AI literacy for learners as well. So do have a look at those. Talked about those. So we can have 1 or 2 quick questions if you've got any.
Harry, we've a question in the chat here from Michaela. What are the potential impact of using AI to assess student work?
There's movement in that space, so it's high risk for AI to mark all the work. I mean, it already does with formative assessment and multiple choice questions. We're looking to run a pilot looking at the marking space, whether it's helping with providing feedback or helping to review. But I do believe there'll always be a quality assurance process where humans are involved. It's quite interesting. I think the potential impact could be quite big, but it's starting to happen because it's a higher risk. Creating a lesson plan using ChatGPT is lower risk, but marking a student's piece of work is higher risk. So we need to make sure there's the guardrails in place for that. So we're certainly looking at running a pilot around that area and looking at what parts of assessment it might be. So for now, I think we've all got to continue marking. Lovely.
Any further
Excellent.
questions? Just before we wind up here. Okay, I think that's it, Patty. So
Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along this afternoon. There are those resources and sessions as well to come along to if you get time, and we've got recordings of those as well. So have a good afternoon, and I hope this was useful.
thanks, folks. Okay, bye.
Lovely. I'll end the meeting now, everybody. Have a good afternoon.